So let's begin. A little bit late, but got it done.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. This is the Facilities Workshop, May 2nd. We have 4 items to brief you on this evening. First, SREF versus charter schools. This is a cost comparison exercise that we were asked to work through by board member Wheeler. Second item is portable canopies. Third item, projects update, and then finally a Harmony Middle School AA update. So we'll launch right into our first item, SREF versus charter schools. Mr. John Davis, our staff architect, will lead us through that.
To approach this is a little difficult subject to try to make the comparison, and I've always argued that it's not how much we pay per square foot to build a building that's the difference between charter schools and SREF schools. It has to do with the building code and the rules and what we have to build, not how we build them. The building codes that the district has to comply with is the Florida Building Code 2014 is section 453, which is state requirements, and the state requirements for education 14, SREF 14. Charter schools comply with section 305, which is educational group E occupancy. The 453 is public school occupancies. The major difference is not in the building code. Building for section 453 does not allow the district to use wood for structural components. The charter schools can use wood for structural components. Other than that, there aren't very many differences between the building codes. The main difference is SREF. And SREF has a very long list of spaces that are required in a public school depending on the grade level, and it goes all the way through colleges. It's kindergarten through colleges. We did work with Frank Atkinson and his group before he passed away.
Taylor Smith.
And they were able to provide us a facilities list for their K-8 that they constructed. And it was 1,148 student K-8 facility. And it was built rather recently, so it was actually built after our west side that we used for ours. And this is a list of the spaces. There were a total of 19 different spaces. Now, some of them are multiple spaces, like classrooms or 12 spaces. But it was 19 different categories of spaces they constructed in their facility. The next page is what we built at the Westside K-8 facilities, and this follows SREF and what's required. We have a total of 91 different category of spaces that we had to provide versus their 19. The difference is the charter school was approximately 68,000 square feet, and 1,148 student stations, so an average of 59.4 square feet per student. The District K-8 is 173,598 square feet for 1,527 student stations, or 113.7 square feet per student. So once again, it's not, I didn't even try to do dollar amounts because it's not a really good comparison to try to what they spent, we spent. But if you just look at the volume of building that we have to construct compared to the volume of building that is constructed with a typical charter school, that's the major difference in the cost. We're building twice as much school.
Why don't we find a way to market this data? I mean, if we're in competition with charter schools, and I'm sitting here as a parent looking at one of these 2 schools, and one of them's got 19 different spaces and we have 91, I might want my kid to be where they've got a lot more options and things to do. But I can promise you, until we did all this, I don't think any of us knew this. We knew it was different, but those are pretty big telling numbers.
If you could go back, because the question I was going to ask along those lines is, I saw some spaces that were the athletic spaces, correct?
Like coach's shop.
So those aren't required spaces, though, are they?
They're
required under our policy as a school board, but they're not state requirements. Is that correct?
In SREF for middle schools and high school, it lists all the spaces that you can build. You're right. Some of it is district policy, and if you build them, then you have to build them by SREF standards.
Correct, yeah.
Some spaces. And we developed the ed spec list for every school prior. That's the first thing we do when we start a new school, is we work with the educational side of the house and come up with what spaces does the district want in a new school for that school that they're going to build, and then we have to use the SREF square footage and sizes to provide those spaces.
I mean, whether it's required or not, it's still.
No, it's still,
true that
no,
we
no, no, I
build.
think on the marketing piece, you're right on point. I was just wondering, you know, if you, the true 91 spaces, if we said, well, that's not a state requirement, what do we get that down to? And I'm not asking you to go back and redo that or anything.
Well, I would say that I'm glad that you pointed it out, because even when I looked at it and went through it with the guys, I didn't know that or really think about it the way that you just did. And so that was enlightening to me as well that you brought that out. I think there's two parts of that. There's maybe three things I'll say. One is that it may be worthwhile to see which one of these are triggered by our own philosophies and own internal requirements that we put in place. Because as we're having conversations with the state, if we don't really know how to compare an apple and an apple, it doesn't make our case or argument very strong. The other thing I was going to ask, though, is I know that the approach was K-8, K-8. Would it be a better approach to do similar size schools, even if that's a K-5? I mean, you have 1,154 student station and a 1,524, whatever the number was. And I understand the approach is let's take two K-8s and put them side by side. But is there a variance if we did it with a K-5 that's a 900 or 1,000 student station school compared to an 1,154 K-8? And what difference does that create? I'm just asking. I mean, I don't know.
Well, one of the problems, when we build a school for total occupancy of the school when it's full. When a charter school builds a school, they build the size of the school for their first year operation. And then they have phased-in construction, or they may have phased-in construction that they'll add classrooms as the school grows and they have more students coming in. So to find a charter school that matches our district school capacity, it would be a challenge to try to find one that matches it. Because their elementaries may only start off at 300 to 400 students in them.
But couldn't we
when
take
they
one that's
originally build them.
fully built out? It doesn't matter if it's year 1 or year 6. If at the end of the day they're both 1,100 student station schools.
Correct. If we could find
I don't know if it's the right approach. I'm just thinking.
I'm not sure there how many charter school and even elementary schools are to the 900 student stations. They usually tend to cap out about 500 or 600, which is below ours.
Sure. Last point I'll make is to your point about the competition piece and how do you share or create that message. I think part of that is not just the space, but understanding the difference in programming and offerings as
absolutely.
well.
Yeah, it's the whole thing,
And
absolutely.
that's kind of where that came from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the important piece is,
'Cause
you
I
know,
don't think
when you
we're
go
doing-
here, you get this. When you go here, you get this. And this correlates into more space, more whatever, more programming.
And I'd like to say one more thing is, as we compete, talking about Mr. Thacker's competition, and that's why that's what everybody thinks the charter school is to make the public schools better. I think they have. But now, if we compete on this level, we make the charter schools better.
Right.
And I think that's the way to go. As long as the state doesn't come up with some rule that says we're not allowed to market against the charter school.
Here, there's a couple things. First off, I want to thank Mr. Clinch and Mr. Davis for doing this. I appreciate it, and you did it in a way that actually somebody like me can understand it. That's number one, which helps. Number two, but more importantly, we talk about competition. As we go to Tallahassee and we're competing, asking, hey, we don't get enough money, we need more money for X or Y or Z or whatever, what we are allowed to do is we are allowed by a supermajority vote to get relief from SREF, which I think where we want to go, which is not to suggest that we're going to say, okay, take out items A through F, but keep G through M, et cetera, but give us the flexibility, because number one, it allows these folks all to figure out what is best and why with the relief. And number two, when we go to Tallahassee and we say, okay, we need more money for schools, they can say, well, what have you done? We passed the half-penny sales tax referendum. We've given ourselves relief from SREF. We're using everything available to us, which is not to suggest that we're going to sit here right now and say, we should get rid of, what pieces and parts, but it gives our professionals the flexibility that as we're moving forward, they see something that makes sense for us that maybe the state's saying, well, you got to do it this way. Now we have voted to give them the relief, and they can come back and say, well, we're doing this instead of what the state says because we've gotten the relief and it makes sense for us. So I think that, Clarence, you make a good point from a competitive perspective with families as they're selecting schools, but also for our own purposes and our lobbyists as we're competing with other interests, not just schools, interests for dollars. We can say we have done everything. Plus, we give our staff, our subcontractors, our curriculum specialists, the flexibility that if they want to do something different, they can, which is, I think, what we as a board really need to do. I can't speak for everybody else, but that's my opinion. There's no downside to it, which is not to say we throw everything out. I mean, that's, that's going to be a circumstantial issue.
Frank.
I see two prongs to this issue from my viewpoint, Mark. One is, if you took what are the minimum requirements for the charter school to build versus our minimum requirements.
Right.
Us getting the State Board of Education to say, you know what, you can match up with them minimum. Because, for example, I'm not aware of SREF requiring showers for the male gym teacher and the female gym teacher.
Right.
All right, so when you show these charts, you really got to vet them out or you'll get ripped apart left and right.
That's a good
So
point.
my view is we create a chart, and I'd love to go to Tallahassee to do this with it, that says here are the minimums. So take 1,000-person school in this model. Here's what it's going to cost us to do 1,000-student middle school, and here's what it's going to cost a charter school. You need to let us have that same relief. Then from thereafter, everything you add on is our option.
Well, I don't want to particularly give the legislature, can you go to the slide that's got the first two, that one? Nope. The one that's got keep going.
The one that had the per
totals?
student
Per
square
student
foot.
square foot.
Oh, yeah, last one.
You got to be real careful, because I'm not, I just want to be very clear, I'm not a proponent of saying, let's build a bare bones school that doesn't have anything for students.
Out of wood.
Out of wood. I want, I mean, there's a lot of these things I want, and the last thing I want, if the state legislature, our House members see this slide, first thing they're gonna say is, I told you, regular schools just wasting money, look at that. They build them for $60 a foot and we're spending $113. So I want to be careful on what that meant.
The lifespan of that wood school.
It's not just the lifespan.
Is-
I want kids to have amenities in schools.
No, I'm in agreement
gyms
with
and
you,
everything.
Clarence.
I don't want to start saying, if we don't build gyms, if you'll let us build schools that don't have anything but 20 classrooms, we can do it for the same price.
Sorry.
I don't like that, or I just personally do that.
But don't you go through it and say, we don't want to be obligated to build I mean, there's some stuff in these
Like the
requirements.
shower.
Yeah, I think this was really a comparison, what SREF does as compared to charter. So I think the part that we could have honed in a little bit more on, like you pointed out, the PE amenities, we really don't have to. We do that because it's part of our district standard.
And I support doing
So
it.
there are some additional items on this list that we could take out.
Yeah.
So it's not really the 91 versus the 19.
And I'm not in
And
favor,
But it's
show it
pretty
like we
close
do.
to that.
80 of them are required, and we add an additional 11.
but I'm not in favor of sitting here right now and saying, take this out, put this in. I mean, I think we need to just give them flexibility, so that way we can show we're doing everything we can to use dollars as
And
efficiently
I
as we can.
think Frank brings up a good point. So if you do the PE amenities, then you're required to do the showers. And in our experience in middle schools, the showers are not utilized.
We
In some
surveyed all
cases,
the
they're used
schools in
for
Orange.
storage.
They were
So-
all used, they all had molds, so we stopped building them because
Right.
the teachers didn't use them.
So that's possibly an opportunity as we move forward. But again, that would be more of, well, taking that district standard to the next level to get that exemption. And to Board Member Wheeler's point, there is a Florida statute that addresses it. This is a great lead-in for our next presentation that gives you flexibility.
I'll get straightened for you.
But however, that Florida
not
statute,
everything, though.
1013.385, is specific to 4 items. interior load-bearing walls, and that's the structural wood versus some other material. Exemptions having to do with walkways, roadways, driveways, parking lots, relocatables, and that's actually what we're going to hone in on our next presentation, and then site lighting and other construction specifications regarding site lighting. So that's really what that Florida statute hones in on. It's not really a broad brush that you can be exempt from anything under SREF. There are very specific items that allows exemptions with the supermajority vote.
With Deborah?
So if I could just ask for clarification so I make sure everybody understands. So SREF says if you're going to have a locker room, you have to have showers.
That's currently.
And what
the
you're
way
saying is that it would
leads.
potentially make sense, because we know those showers aren't being used anymore, to say that's the kind of stuff that we would like flexibility in regarding SREF, but currently this statute doesn't allow for that.
We don't believe it does, no. It does not make specific mention to that
Right.
item.
And see, what
Yeah.
we're saying is that
It's true.
we would want to continue to provide athletic spaces
Sure.
for our students in our schools, especially a K-8 school, like PE rooms, but allow us the flexibility that charter schools have, if they have a PE space, to not put in showers, which don't make sense, because that's a huge expense by the time you factor in the plumbing as well as the square footage
Ceramic
and all that
tile,
other
drains.
stuff that goes along with
Sure,
it.
sure, sure,
So
sure.
that's where, that's, I
I
think,
understand.
part of this. I think, going back to Clarence's point, we don't want to just build bare bones
Exactly.
schools that
Right.
won't last and that are impossible to maintain with quality for a long period of time. I will tell you, when I visit some of our charter school structures, some of our newer charter school structures, the size of those classrooms, the size of the corridors, all of those things are very, very different than what our students are experiencing. So then that comes back to your other point about, it is up to us now to truly market as a choice district what we're offering that they are not. And they're gonna do the same.
Yep.
The problem is too, though, however, we have less flexibility in the dollars that we can spend on things like advertising and marketing.
They've got
So that's an
VPs of
important
marketing,
piece.
VPs of
We have to
advertising.
generate those types of funds through other sources, not taxpayer dollars. For example, our cell phone tower leases. If we're gonna do marketing materials, marketing time, and they don't have those same kinds of requirements. So
We are-
that just kind of is what I would say to sum this
There's-
up and lead us into the next piece.
There's law that says that we can't promote our schools.
We're
Like
very
straight up?
restricted in what we
can't
can use with
use-
taxpayer
use
dollars,
money.
But
with
we can
FEFP.
give information,
Right.
right?
Yeah, yes.
We can give information.
Yeah, we can't.
That's
provide
called
information.
marketing, giving information. That's what it's called.
We have to be careful
Well,
not to
what- what
take
are the
it.
different-
I want you to use these terms legally. You are authorized to communicate with the public.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we could spend money
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a quick question, Kelvin.
Yes, yes, sir.
And I asked this the other day, and I don't know if you got Mr. Kruppenbacher or not. Supermajority on a 5-person board, is it still 3 or is it 4?
I thought you read where
It
it's
is.
not supermajority.
I thought I read somewhere where a supermajority on a 5 was still a 3, but is that not the
I
case?
thought what you read when I was in there said it was
Simple
three.
majority.
The supermajority
okay.
was not in there.
It's not specifically
Yeah, I
called
have
out.
it here. It's not specific in
Well, I
the
was
Florida
looking-
statute. It just says supermajority.
I always thought it was 4.
Hold on, but this whole topic about supermajority, you're talking about, what, a board of 5 that's gonna go ahead and waive SREF?
Any three of us makes us.
Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah, but it would have to be 4 votes, not 3, is what. And then, but
I was
now
under
we're
the impression
discussing.
it was-
Sorry, I just missed the part that we were talking, I thought this was something about legislature.
It's an option.
So, well, how soon can we get it on the agenda for approval?
Well, I don't even know what I'd be approving.
Well, the next item
we'll
is
leave
what
for-
we're going to talk
Okay,
about
okay.
with the exemption.
I'm sorry.
But let us research
what
that.
that
We'll
means.
get back with exactly what supermajority would mean for the size of this board.
It's 4.
It's 4.
It is,
I know
okay,
that.
all right.
I always thought it was
4-1.
There's no
Okay.
question about
We
that.
got a lawyer here, he can count.
Frank said 4, I'm going with 4.
It is 4-1? Okay.
And that's not just any SREF, that's specific.
But I wouldn't want to
Right,
be the
4
odd
that
man out
relate
with
to
this
the
group.
1013.3.
I wouldn't want to be the odd man out with this group.
Wednesday night.
Okay, so
So would a
portable
supermajority be
canopies?
9?
Okay, our next item, we'll bring our Director of Design and Construction, Mark Locker, to the table
Afternoon, everyone.
to run through portable canopies.
We have already gotten a very good segue. Yes, the Florida statute that we've just been discussing, which is 1013-385, it does require a supermajority vote in a public meeting that's held no earlier than 5 p.m. Those are the requirements. So you have to have a public hearing. It's got to be a supermajority vote. So we are trying to clean up all of our aging projects now that we have the half-penny sales tax and we're getting our workforce ginned up. So one of the things that jumped right out at us is we had a lot of projects that were on hold. They were deferred. So we started picking those apart and finding out if they weren't needed anymore, we did away with them. If it's something that was really justified, we went ahead and created a project for it and moved ahead. But we ran across all these projects for canopies. Turns out there were 10 projects lingering out there to connect existing portables that we'd placed on campuses to other permanent buildings. So when you look at SREF, it actually does require that any modular classroom, and they use the term modular to mean portables, prefabbed, but anything that's relocatable is in their view a modular building, which includes a leased portable. But we also own quite a few portables that are modular buildings. So if that building is there for more than 3 years, it's required to be connected to the rest of the campus by a covered walkway. So when you put a portable in, it's
On the buy low and sell high.
That's John calling you from back there.
Yeah. So when you put a portable in, you have no idea how long that portable is going to be there. You may have some idea. The reason that they put the 3-year period in there is Tallahassee thought it was unreasonable for a school district that was going to use a portable for temporary housing to temporarily relieve a school, or while you're doing a construction project. If you have to renovate a building, you have to move all the students out of that building temporarily, they'll let you put portables in, and you don't have to connect them to canopies because of the cost. Knowing that when you're done with the renovation, portables go away, everything's back to normal. So that's why they had the 3-year provision in there. So the statute that we've been talking about, 1013-385, allows relief from this one particular area in SREF. In order to get that relief, you must do a cost-benefit analysis. Basically find out what your exposure would be to put in all these necessary canopies by the letter of SREF, or not do it. So we started off by doing that, so we knew we had at least 10. So we went and researched and found out there's actually 26 campuses that have modular or portables on them.
Good thing it doesn't rain in Florida.
And they have 200, so there's, the good news is there's only a total of 226 of these modular portable classrooms in the district. And that Mark and I came from Orange County. At one time we had 4,000. So the district has done an admirable job.
Yes.
And it should not go without notice that it is one of the district's goals to reduce portables. We're never going to eliminate portables. And I wouldn't advocate that because they serve a very valid purpose. But clearly, from all the projects we've had to put additions on schools, to do site modifications to existing space relocation, space reconfigurations we call them, to free up more classrooms, take very large classrooms into right-sized, larger number of classrooms. So it's not a growing problem in the district, in other words. The only, and I say we have no clear policy, we actually do have some covered walkways to some modular buildings. They happen to be county-owned, so our leased portables don't have canopies to them. But we actually own quite a few of these modular buildings. For example, at OXA, Oxa doesn't really have traditional classrooms. All their classrooms are either the ones that went in right away, and those have got canopies to them, and then the newer leased units that are in the back do not have canopies to them. Next slide. So, the reason we wanted to have this meeting was to come up with a united opinion moving forward on where we go from here. Now that we have the opportunity to get relief from this situation. We could do nothing. The risk with doing nothing is now that Tallahassee has thrown this out there, I think they're going to expect people to either use it or play by the rules. So if we don't take any action, Tallahassee may very well start putting more pressure to then go and put canopies to these
I got a question.
these portables.
Questions for Dr. Pace. Dr. Pace, you bring, is there, or maybe I'm ahead of myself, is there a recommendation coming?
There is.
Yes.
2 pages.
Thank you. Keep going.
So we could, again, follow SREF by the letter and start putting in canopies tomorrow. We've got 10 projects sitting there waiting. And it actually would have to be 26 projects if we did them all. We could use the new statute to completely excuse us from ever having to put another canopy to a portable, and that may not necessarily be in our best interest either. Or we could tailor our own program. We could use the statute to get relief, but then go case by case on whether it makes sense to keep, replace these portables.
And the important distinction is if we go after the exemption, that's not to say that we don't have continued flexibility. We
Right.
could go ahead and install covered canopies, canopy portables, if we so desire, but we would no longer be required by the state to do so.
And one of the earlier slides, I didn't really go over, we went by it. There are multiple types of canopies that all have a different cost associated with them, of course. The kind of canopies that you typically see at the front of a school for your parent drop-off or your bus drop-off, those are big, heavy aluminum canopies. They have very large foundations that are quite expensive to put in. There are other types of canopies that meet all of the code requirements, but they're much cheaper to go in. They don't have the extensive foundation requirements. And we actually have them in the district. We have them in Oxa, we have them at Boggy Creek, and other places as well. Obviously, those stood up to the hurricane fairly well. So there is a cost differential. Obviously, since we put this type of canopy in at Oxa and Boggy Creek, both for district-owned modular buildings,
Right.
that may be something that we want to continue in the future. If we purchase any more of these or keep them, we may want to maintain those covered canopies to them and only get relief from the new portables that we're putting in for whatever length of time we may not be known. So, oops. Yeah. So, the overall exposure, it's fairly considerable amount of money. Even if we go to the insulated panel, lighter type of canopies, it's still a $2.3 million exposure to go and make everything right now. Plus, we wouldn't even recommend doing that because we've got portables at Michigan Avenue and places where we are going to be doing work soon. So we wouldn't want to go do that right away.
So hence highlighted the projects. We took those first 5 completely off the list from the
And that
the
it
sales
still gets you
tax.
down to a $1.6 million problem. And, for temporary portables. So the recommendation that we would make is to take this opportunity, go after the exemption. We've already done the analysis. All we'd have to do is bring this basically to a regular school board meeting, have it go to vote, and if the supermajority decides to get relief, then that's the direction
I
we go
can't
in.
speak for the other board members, but as far as I'm concerned, put it on the agenda for May 16th to approve. I don't know why we wouldn't. There's no downside. I mean, just
There is
'cause-
the procedure that's specified that says the district school board
Public
must
hearing?
conduct at least one public workshop to discuss and receive public comment, which must begin no earlier than 5 PM. I don't know if this would count about that. I mean, it was on the agenda that we would talk about it, Frank, but you would
It's not
tell us
5
if we had to
o'clock.
have
Not
it.
yet.
5 o'clock.
I know.
Let's talk about, let's bring it back in 20 minutes.
No, it says begin no earlier than.
No earlier than 5.
Well,
So we have to- we'd have to do that at our
well,
next
to be
meeting.
fair to the public, I
We
think
should do it
maybe
at our
we
next-
should add a public hearing to our next meeting.
Right.
And to be fair, and if maybe somebody wants to come forward and talk about it, I certainly don't want to try to rush something through that.
Right, I would agree.
That's the way I would prefer to do
Absolutely.
it.
And if
But
it gets to the agenda, I'd like to hear from a couple principals. Maybe that's have one with a long distance, one with not, on what kind of problems it is causing them versus not.
well, we're still getting covered walkways, right? Not at all.
No.
Just that this would be to eliminate them, to be excluded from the requirement to install them at relocatables, at portables.
Correct, but there are some areas where we could, with this SREF relief, install a less expensive walkway.
We could do
What I'm
that
understanding.
under the current
I don't
requirement
think
that
they were
requires a
looking-
covered
I
walkway.
misunderstood what
I
that
don't
is.
think we're looking to not put walkways in. What we're looking is just give flexibility. In some cases, for instance,
Well,
Michigan Avenue, it doesn't
yeah.
make any sense at all.
Because we're rebuilding.
No, I get
Yeah.
that.
But if
no, my
we have
question
some
is-
sort of permanent stuff, we can put a less expensive
Here.
walkway in.
We can do that today.
I know what Clarence
We can
says.
do the laminated panel today or the heavier
Right.
extruded
Well, they
aluminum.
can
And
do that.
and we do that already in
What
several
I'm saying is,
cases.
if we got portables already been there 10 years without a canopy, and it's 5 feet to the next canopy, and nobody's ever had an issue, I don't
Yeah.
want to spend $1.6 million.
No, I'm-
If we've got a portable that's 3.5 blocks from the school, maybe we should put a
Yeah.
canopy on
I understand.
And the,
it, or move the portable.
Move the portable, yeah.
and
I'm just saying, I'd like to
Some of those
hear,
portables will fall apart.
before I would want to spend $1.6 million, I want to hear where, I'd want to slice that again, probably.
well, another reason to go after this exemption is right now,
I don't have a problem with that.
us and most of the other, there's only, that I know of, only 2 counties in Florida that put in portables, and they don't follow the letter of the law either. They only put them on their new ones, like Orange County. Their old ones are grandfathered and they don't touch them. The other reason for doing this is right now, we are putting our code official a bit at risk. Because for him, he's got a license to maintain, and right now, he's not following the letter of the law when he's going to inspect our new portables we're putting in. Because you have to.
Now we just told everybody.
Well, there has to be some provision that says, I guarantee this portable's not gonna be there for any more than 3 years. In order to make
We
him
guarantee
perfectly.
that on all of them when we put them in on year one.
Well, and up until this time,
Please check.
we haven't had the funds, so it's really, we look at it as an unfunded mandate.
Yeah.
One of many.
Yes.
What I think I hear from the board, though, is that there is consensus to bring this back as a public hearing at our next board
Yep,
meeting.
correct.
And at that meeting, you would like to have a couple of principals. I can certainly work with Mark and Mark on identifying a couple
Sounds
who've
good.
had portables, who can talk to us about the impact. And we'll try to find both
And I
an
don't care if it's
elementary and a
you can speak
secondary
to
one.
it. You can speak to it. I mean,
Okay.
just somebody who knows where it's a problem.
I mean,
I
right
can't
now-
believe they're all problems.
Right now, just the attendees between you, Mr. Shatera, and your leadership team, you
Yeah,
got
yeah,
6
I'm fine with
principals right here.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, then we can do that.
All right.
Okay, very good.
Thanks again for your time.
Thank you,
you,
Mark.
sir.
We'll move on to our next item, projects updates. I'm actually going to go through this quite quickly so we can have time for our 4th item. First, our projects in planning and design. We have 5 projects in planning, $106 million, and that includes our 3 comprehensives that we currently have teed up. In design, we have 34 projects, $39.5
I
million.
gotta back you up for a second.
Yes, sir.
Elementary A, is there a status update relative to that? I mean, I know it's on the books, but I mean,
Yes.
is there any?
As of today, our planning department did reach out to the Celebration Company again.
Did they return the call?
And the latest is that they are now being held up by the county. The county is mandating a secondary egress to that community. So it is now in the county's review. It's in the county's court at this point in time.
Do they have a developer who's pending a purchase after that review, or that's just a
They
compliance
are
issue?
close to having a buyer. I'm looking to Rhonda Blake.
We should be getting their buyer information within the next couple of weeks, but the county is redoing their comp plan amendment on that side of town, in which they are requiring a second southern access into the Celebration Island Village
Southern access.
from the south.
Osceola Polk Line Road.
That's where
Yeah,
Southern
right.
Access comes in.
The county has delayed submitting that CPA for 3 months, and then the state's gonna need 3 months to review it. So we're looking at a minimum of a 6-month delay. This is what we
Okay,
provide
so in the
everybody
event that
access.
this doesn't come out, that this doesn't come to fruition because the buyer backs out because of who knows what, do we have a plan B over on the west side of town?
We looked at several contingency plans. The first was the Siesta Lago site, which we found was not a viable option. So the other contingency would be to do something at West Side K-8. And that would likely involve building a 10-classroom building, which would allow us to get through. We're covered for this coming school year, so now we're looking at the following school year to get through that year. That would get us through an additional year.
Okay, I'm gonna bring up something that may not be popular, or something we need to consider, is the Siesta Lago site, we know isn't usable. However, across the street where the firehouse is, if you go just south of that on Poinciana Boulevard, it's all vacant land. I mean, we know who the owners are, and it's not like so if we eminent domain a certain amount of that property, we're not kicking people out of their houses. Is that something I know it's not popular, but putting more stuff on West Side may not necessarily work either. And I mean, you got bad option 1 and bad option 2. I mean, I'm fully aware of that, and I don't know that, and I hate to bring that up, but maybe that's something we look at, because again, we're not talking about land where you got an apartment building on it, you got people who've lived there for 30 years and it's the family home. You got empty land that they use occasionally for heavy equipment auctions.
Belongs
Right.
to somebody.
I know who it belongs to. I know exactly who it belongs
I'm
to.
not favorable to that whatsoever.
Well, and also the challenge is the funding scheme that was set up for the Celebration Company, where, and I'm
The $12.5 million
to Sarah to help me with this, and Rhonda,
It was
was
10
to.
acres and $12.5 million
Right,
fronted impact.
exactly,
I
that
know
they were
that.
going to front those costs for the real estate, or there would be a way we'd be able
In
to
that
cover
location.
that at that site in Celebration Island, yes.
Rhonda?
And I don't want the wing recommendation to alarm everyone, because the K-8 today is smaller than our recommended K-8 prototype. So the wing would actually require us to remove 4 portables to allow it, and then that wing would just bring it up to our standard K-8 prototype. So I don't want everyone.
You're talking about
to
west
be
side.
alarmed about
Yeah.
it.
West Side K.
Oh, okay,
Right.
okay. You say K, I'm sorry, Celebration.
So I'll say this too, and I'm glad you said that, because my eyebrow raised as soon as you said adding 10, and I started trying to do math, and I'm thinking, isn't that school busting at the seams already? But thank you, because I was concerned about that.
Yeah. Well, and we have a space reconfiguration project that's getting ready to go to construction that will pick us up another 11 classrooms at West Side K, yes.
And keep
This
in mind that
summer.
we do have a charter school opening this fall also along that same area. That's gonna take some of the students. It will relieve West Side K-8 for at least a year.
So factoring in the additional classrooms that we're going to pick up and what we intend to lose with the charter school, puts us good for the upcoming school year.
I'm just not convinced that Celebration Island Village development's ever gonna come out of the ground. I mean, I've seen it and seen it and heard it and heard it and heard it, and the real estate environment is as good as it's been in a long time, and they still can't get a deal done.
Okay, and to our design, the only correction, 3 roof replacement projects, that K-8, Celebration K-8 project is getting ready to move to construction.
Great.
That's an item that we'll be taking to the next board meeting.
Terrific.
Construction, 25 projects, 108.8 million. Lots of these are summer projects, and I'll speak to that in our next slide. And then finally, closeout, 5 projects, 1.3 million. We're doing a really good job with keeping up with our closeouts. Of course, our goal is 120 calendar days or less.
We're replacing a chiller at Zenith. I don't even think that school's 10 years old.
That's a project that we completed over the holidays. It was a project that had been in the works for some
What
time.
happened to the old chillers? I mean, that's not an old school.
Let me follow up on the age and previous condition.
I mean, unless we
Offhand,
took a used chiller from another campus and put it there, I mean, that's,
The building didn't already have a chiller when purchased?
I don't know, but a chiller should, but a chiller should last you 15, 20 years.
Let me get some background on that, and I'll follow up with the board on
Sure.
that item.
Mark, do you have these slides available?
Yes, I do.
Okay, will you
Yes.
send them?
I thought they were sent to the board, were they not?
On these?
Part of this update, this was in with the other two? Okay, I'd be happy to forward the entire presentation. Sir.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so these are the sales tax quick start projects. We call them quick start because they didn't require a lot of construction documentation, carpeting, we needed a pile sample and those types of things. We were able to get these to construction very quickly.
What are we doing to tell people we've done this and are doing this?
That's
It
at the
is
end
on
of
our
this
website.
presentation. But there also is a sample at the end of this presentation for you to see what we're going to do.
So with the projects we completed over the holidays and then spring break, we completed a total of $1.2 million to date. And this is what we have coming up for the summer. $6.5 million, which includes several chiller replacement projects. And finally, our summer 2017 projects, $25 million, 74 projects. So we're going to be very busy, and the hard work is taking place now to get all our plans in place for those summer projects. We have, of those projects listed, we have,
Is BELA Bellalago?
Yeah.
yes,
That's a charter school, though. Is that on us?
but we own it. We own that
Okay,
property.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So the four remaining projects, major summer projects that we have GMPs yet to send forward, and those will be on the 5/16 board agenda, is West Side K8, space reconfiguration. It's completed, ready to go on to the agenda. The Celebration K8 roof replacement project, Tico Plumbing Classroom, and the Mill Creek restroom renovation project. And then under the miscellaneous capital projects, those 23 projects, we have 11 of those that we still have purchase orders to cut.
I gotta ask an unpopular question. All these, these are all.
Trying to be unpopular today, just
Stop. We've had unusually dry weather recently, okay? Going under the premise.
Which has worked in favor for
I
us,
understand
especially
that.
at the high school site.
I understand that. So going under the premise that the weather will not stay unusually dry, how will weather affect this stuff?
We have schedules built in for each of these projects where the CMs have bought in, and they have assumed X amount of
Weather days.
inclement
Okay.
weather days.
Okay.
However, at the end of the day, they have signed contracts, and they're required to provide that project, the substantial completion on that date, or they face liquidated damages, unless they can show that there is a justified reason for a time extension. In the case of inclement weather, they would have to provide a recovery schedule and their data showing that the rain exceeded the averages for that month
Okay.
in Central Florida.
No, okay, I mean, we can look, there's some roof replacements, or playground, and that kind of stuff gets affected by weather.
We will have weather, that's a sure thing, but there are provisions
Built in.
built into those
Okay.
schedules.
Okay.
They are, in the case of Celebration K8 roof, that is a fast-track schedule. You can't do roofing when it's raining, but we have factored that in, and we do have standbys if we have to work multiple shifts or weekends,
Got it.
7 days a week. That's what the CM has signed up for, to complete that project by the specified substantial completion date. And that, for that particular project, the substantial is very close to the end of the summer. It's actually August 3rd, but we're hoping that we can work through various opportunities and land that project even sooner.
Great. Thank
But from 8/3 to the 10th, when the students arrive, there is some fallback. We would really like to have the roofing completed by the 3rd, when the teachers arrive.
Sure.
But at that point in time, it will be minor items, trimming out the roof, the heavy lifting will be completed by then.
Mark, two quick questions. What are some examples of these 23 miscellaneous projects?
Um,
And you said there's 11 with POs are still out, but
I,
if you don't know, just maybe get that. I just want to know. You can email it over to me or something like that.
okay, I'll send you a complete list of the 23.
Okay. And then the other is, obviously, you guys have a lot to do and a lot to manage. The board's been very supportive over the last number of months of ramping up your department. Do you have what you need to manage all of these projects?
Yes, we do. Yes, sir. And again, we're finalizing our plans so that, actually, in some cases, before the students go home, we're ready to start those projects. But starting most of those projects sometime around May 31st, June 1st. The last day for students is on the 30th.
Thanks.
There's none of these projects that we're waiting for the summer that are life safety issues currently, are there?
Actually, some of those are fire alarm replacement projects. However, the current fire alarms are still operational. So in many cases, we're upgrading the fire alarms.
So they're working.
There's been additional nodes that have been added to the system.
Okay.
So that existing
Nobody's
panel
unsafe.
no longer accommodates those additional nodes. Okay, and we'll end up with a quick update on our comprehensive renovations. Our custodies were submitted to the Department of Education on 3/24 for Michigan Ave, Denjon, and St. Cloud. As of today, we've been contacting the state pretty much every other day. Mr. Davis has been reaching out to his contact in Tallahassee to get updates. We had a request on the 30th, 3:30, for additional information. We provided that additional information on 3:30, so we're being told that they're in review. We continue to monitor those custodies. And our CM process has been completed. We'll be making a recommendation to the board this evening. And again, this is a very aggressive schedule, 7-month design, 19-month construction in 2 phases, which would mean a mid-year move-in. We'd start the project in December, this December, and we would land the following December, move the staff and students to the new school, and then demolish the existing school. And at the completion of that phase, finish to start with the St. Cloud Middle School project. Are there any questions? Okay, with that, we'll bring up Schinkel Schultz, Mr. David Torbert, Mr. Patrick Roush.
I appreciate your aggressive scheduling there too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
And our next update is the Harmony Middle School AA update. We'll provide an update on the status of our design. Mr. Torbert.
Okay, well, good evening. Glad to be here. We've got a fairly brief presentation to go through. I'm going to let Patrick walk through most of it. We got handouts of it for those who.
Oh, yes.
What you're essentially going to hear is that we're right on track in terms of schedule and moving forward. We've had a lot of good interaction with staff and gotten a lot of very good input regarding the design. We're going to look at a couple of the exterior design concepts, the pretty picture stuff that give you a sense of kind of where that's headed, at least. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about the schedule. So I'm going to let Patrick walk you through most of the detail of it. And certainly, as always, ask questions as we go. We're happy to answer.
Just handouts.
So this is the existing site, which we've already talked about on the project. We know there's a substantial amount of wetlands that are really centrally located right in the middle of the site that we've had to develop and kind of work around to conserve as much of that as possible. The site plan that we're going with right now, which I think is very similar to what you guys have already seen in the past, located the new middle school closer to AJ Gallagher. It did a couple of things I think it helped us stay out of the wetland area so that we could get an actual site permit through the Armored Corps engineers. It also gave us more visibility off of AJ Gallagher Road, and it was kind of the best of all the options that we had previously discussed. This is just a little closer up view to just kind of go over what we're doing on the site. One of the things we had talked about early on, one of the goals was to give more additional practice space to the Harmony High School. So we're actually filling in a portion of this pond to create some more athletic field area that can be shared by the high school and the middle school. We're also talking about adding a bike path connection, which goes all the way back to the new ag program being built at Harmony High School.
So realistically,
Yep.
with that high school practice field, when it rains in September and they're practicing football, are they gonna need boots up to here or up to here? I mean, I've seen this movie in Celebration, that's why I'm asking. It's
This spot isn't quite as low as Celebration, but it's not.
And Jay, when the site is constructed, I mean, the grades are going to be brought up, so I mean, it's not going to be in an area that's designed to flood or get wet or
I
anything
don't
like
think any
that.
area is
So,
designed to flood.
well, but it's going to be designed so that the field should be
It
dry.
is Holy Paul.
Okay, I mean, I've seen that movie before.
To the 100 year?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, just real quickly, Jay, one of the differences at Celebration is those same practice fields are in the floodplain.
Celebration High School is
Yeah, yeah. So there's a pretty key
No,
difference
okay.
there between that.
But what you're doing is you're taking something that's wet right now, draining it.
And it's going to be
Okay.
brought up too.
Okay.
We also, again, have the gym located towards the back where we have our play field, softball, track and field, which is also utilized as a bus drop-off in the morning. One of the things we had added previously was a new concession building. There was some concern about making sure we had some restrooms and concessions by the softball field and by the practice field as well, so we did add that. We have some overflow stabilized soil parking located off the service drive for people to be closer to the ball fields. And bike racks located here, again, for connection to the bike path going up to Harmony High School. Hasn't really changed since we last talked about it very much, very little, but any other questions about the site before we go on?
Where was that parking?
Parking to the north.
Yes.
Two for the,
Where was the parking you just talked about? The surface level parking? The additional?
Well, a couple of things, yeah. The additional parking I mentioned was actually right here, which is stabilized soil parking. This is pretty much as close as we could get to sort of these athletic fields without impeding into the wetland area. So just kind of a little bit extra to get there.
And approximately how far is that?
3.8 miles.
3.8 miles, yeah. It seems to be good.
I mean, this is roughly 300 feet. So
Okay, I should have been able to, yeah,
Yeah.
if that's 300
Yeah.
feet, okay, so it's 300 feet.
but you also added parking in the north.
Right, and to Mark's point, one of the other things we did also was add some additional parking over here, which is good for after hours. So if someone's coming to watch their kid play basketball in the evening, we'll have parking located here where they can enter right into the building here. So this would be during the day for staff parking, but also in the evening, it's really located nicely for after hours use for all the athletic events.
Do we need the concession building? Do we have that at other schools?
We typically haven't done it on,
The-
like Westside K, it doesn't have it, but
Are we talking the restroom?
no.
The additional concession building.
One of the
And that
concerns
houses our restrooms as
Yeah.
well. We're required to have that because we're not within 200 feet. Our amenities are more than 200 feet from the restrooms in the building. So while we were providing the restrooms, we took the opportunity to provide a small covered concession
Yeah,
area.
yeah.
And a lot of that's tied to the wetland area as well. Typically, we'd like to keep the softball field as close as we could to the gym and area, but because the wetlands and the shape of the site sort of dictated where we could put some of the amenities, we were kind of forced to push it farther away from the building, and that's why that came about during design. Any questions on the site?
I got a question. You may be the best one to answer. I know this was started at a different time than the high school, but I haven't been there in the morning when school starts. Are you comfortable, based on whatever those flex start times are, we can get the people in and out and then in and out?
I am. I'm a little curious to see over the next few months as the new sheriff facility prepares to open, what traffic does there, and then we'll have to monitor it. But it's certainly something that we'll have to take into consideration with our high school and middle school start times.
As long as you're comfortable
Yeah.
to be dealt with.
And I think that's a good point, because that A.J. Gallagher Road could become pretty darn congested, could it not?
It could be. Like I said, I think that's one of the things we're gonna have to look at.
It's right.
But as we start some conversations this summer about redistricting, we're also gonna try to get some community stakeholder input about school start times. You know, currently we have high school, elementary, then middle. And I think we're gonna have to continue to keep that as our three-tiered system if we're gonna move forward, so that there's a nice chunk of time between the high school piece and the middle school piece.
Anything else on the site before we go on?
No?
Just to give a quick update on the site plan, the permits for the site, they're all essentially on track. The most important one is the very first one, Army Corps of Engineers. The plan was to submit that on March 20th. We did submit that on March 20th. We're on schedule, knowing that that's a very long lead time. They originally said as long as a year to get that process done, which will ultimately control when we can start construction. It sounds like we may be able to cut it a little bit and get it in January at the earliest. But that's what we're hearing right now is at the earliest January, but at the latest March. So
We would really like to be in construction by January.
That'd be great.
But again,
But we'll be sitting on go either way, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the other ones are all just under review: the Osceola County compliance, SDP, ERP, and the water and sewer permit are all ongoing, so they're all on track. The next thing we wanted to do is talk about the exterior design.
Before you do, actually, are we adding anything to this school that is not common and normal, or that's not in place at other middle schools across the district? Do we have all of these elements at all of our middle schools?
This is a typical middle school.
This is consistent across the district?
The concession bathroom thing.
That's the one
Maybe a
piece
little
that's a
bit
little
different.
bit different, but with respect
that's
to the
based
other
on
two
your
buildings,
Right, correct.
they are very consistent with your other buildings.
So Horizon's not going to look at this and say, hey, why don't we have this? And Discovery or whatever. Okay.
The next thing we want to do is look at the exterior design. And essentially, we sort of narrowed down to two different options. Some of the early feedback we got was consider looking at Harmony High School because it's so directly next to it that maybe we look at an option where it blends the style of Harmony High School and then also maybe a more modern approach that kind of stands on its own. So the first one is really taking that approach, a more, let's say, a contextual approach, looking at, okay, what's right next door to it and taking some cues from the high school. This would be some ground face CMU block with the tower element, very similar to what you see when you drive by Harmony High School. So this was the first option. The second option is more of a modern approach, which has an overhead canopy system above the top. It eliminates the need to have a tower system, so you actually would save a little bit of money if you go into a system like this. It's a little more simple, and I think there's some bolder colors we can use. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say on this, I don't think we have to mirror Harmony High School, but as long as there is some blending. Does that make sense? I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't have to be a tower to a tower.
Right.
But as long as I think it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb, like this one's really different than this one. That's kind of how I would envision it. I mean, I hope that's what
I'm good with blending. I don't want to do
Yeah.
anything that makes Harmony High School look 150 years old either.
That is true as well. Yeah.
So, I mean, between the two options, we can always use very similar color palettes. I mean,
Yeah.
to use the same paint that we had on Harmony, but the style of tower can be different as well.
Yeah, I like this. I like that too. Yeah. I don't mind making it a little different as long as we kind of
Keep the same
color
language.
family or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
And I have this exact same feeling.
Yeah.
So what's the feeling between the two?
I like the second one.
Second one, yeah. I think that's kind of, internally, I think we sort of like the second one a little bit also. Taking to the point, I think, looking at using some of the same color from the
You
high
already
school,
picked that one.
so it still feels the same.
That's the first I've seen it, other than looking at the stuff ahead of time.
That's great. Great.
Okay.
Anything else
So
on
noted.
the elevations?
Okay. Don't say that.
Yep.
This one looks like a correction. Look at that, look at that.
Just an update on the schedule. Again, this is something we talked about before. The big push was making sure we had our civil engineer submit to the Army Corps of Engineers on March 20th, which he did. So that is in process right now. That can take us between 10 and 12 months, so we get that on time. The building design schedule, we've gone through program verification with Mr. Allen and the group. We've done the design development was submitted. It's currently under review by the building department, so we're getting some building comments. We're ongoing coordination, but everything is on track right now, and we're on track to submit 100% CDs at the end of June.
We are in production documents now. The ship has left the dock. We no longer have time to come back for changes. A change would affect the schedule at this point in time. We must keep moving forward with production documents.
My question it relates to that is, Mr. Allen, from your work and what you're looking to do across the district with middle schools and the way that we went about designing the new high school, being extremely intentional about designing the school to meet the education needs and the programming needs that we're looking to create in the district, Are we making sacrifices anywhere in this? Are you comfortable that this not only meets what we're currently doing, but also what we want to do in the future? Are we building a campus that's going to accommodate future learning styles, teaching styles, and all of the above that we had that very robust conversation on with our new high school?
We are. And I'm very comfortable with what we put together. Some of the aspects that we talked about with the new high school, with the learning centers, we're gaining opportunity there in certain parts of the building. All the programs that we are implementing and making sure the facilities are prepared for are going to complement what's in the high school. So yes, to answer your question, I feel very good about it.
When you say the high school, you mean the new high school or the Harmony High School?
Harmony High School.
Okay.
So just to clarify for the board, you are involved in discussions ahead of this with Mark's team to help with the planning piece.
Yeah, and I knew he was.
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
you know, we were so intentional about the conversations regarding how we designed that high school that I don't want us to rush so much on any school that we then sit back as a board 6 months or 6 years from now and go, man, we really should have had some different conversations. We really missed an opportunity to design what we really should be designing.
That intentionality has now been built into the process
Yeah.
for
Yes.
planning. For example, I was at Michigan Avenue this morning. I had a chance to talk with Diane Nichols. She's already had 2 meetings about the new designs for Michigan Avenue, even though we're not firming up a selection for the architect until tonight, and has 2 more already on her calendar. So we're including that teaching and learning stakeholder input from the very beginning.
How much does that represent what the desire and the spirit of the board has been in the conversations that we've had over the last 2 years regarding the new high school? Because with all due respect, we certainly want the input from all the key leadership members and the site principal and everybody else, but also the board has kind of set a general tone of where we want to go as a district. So I want to make sure that those conversations are aligning to the spirit and the tone of what the board has set out.
We met with all the stakeholders before we had brought the site concepts to you to gather their input. So the focus at that point in time was the exterior, the placement of the buildings, and how the site amenities were laid out. When we had that input before we came to you to get the final buy-in for how we move forward with the site plan that we ultimately selected. We then went back to all the stakeholders, transportation, IT, food services, all the stakeholders in the district, and got their collective input for the interior, the guts of the project. So that we are now moving forward with that input in our production design.
But with the vision of the board guiding those conversations.
Sure. And I think an important point would be for you guys, you know how intentional the board has been about this for the last number of years. As someone who's working for the board, I'd want to make sure that you guys understand that everything that you're designing captures that same spirit as well. I don't want to be a disappointed board member when we open a school and we actually start seeing the vertical work taking place and there not really be every kind. And I understand we're rushed. I understand there's a lot to manage and there's a timeline. And to your point, the ship has left the dock. I understand that. I just want to make sure we're all genuinely on the same page and going in the same direction, and no one of us as stakeholders are going to be surprised.
Yes, yep, understood.
So that's kind of, that's the conclusion of the presentation.
Presentation.
Thank you, guys.
Get her done.
We know you guys can do it.
Gives about 20 minutes before we begin on the board.
We had one quick item that we wanted to share with you, and this has to do with our project signs, not only for our sales tax projects, but for our impact projects as well. So the first is an example of a sign. This would be a 4x8 plywood. Likely it would be 2 4x8 plywood at 30-degree angles. And it would illustrate the rendering of the project.
Excuse me, Mr. Clinch, Mr. Washire doesn't
Oh,
have-
I'm sorry.
I think you have an extra one under yours there.
So, I'm sorry, the first one is the sales
We gotta
tax
change
project sign, and this would be for our major sales tax projects. The next one is envisioned to be a 3x6 banner that we could attach to a fence or a gate, and this would be for the smaller sales tax projects, for chiller replacements, and we could set limits where we invoke this type of sign versus the larger 4x8 sign. But that larger 4x8 sign would be for those 30 projects that are identified on our sales tax list.
I like the big sign on everything.
Very good idea.
And just so our other projects aren't left out, this would be for our impact fee projects. So for the high school, For the middle school AA, we would do a sign like
I
this.
just kind of want to, I think it's all good, but why just, instead of having two different types, just brand everything the same?
Well, with the sales tax sign, we really wanted to say a thank you to the Osceola
Okay,
County voters.
okay.
So we thought that was a good opportunity to do that. Whereas with the impact projects, we wanted the community to know that this is to improve your community. It's not
Appreciate the
sales tax
sensitivity,
dollars,
I'm
but
never gonna notice that.
Why are we doing the smaller with the smaller project? Is this saving a bunch of money or something?
we don't believe it's justified to do the larger 4x8 plywood sign. For say, a chiller replacement, that's $500,000 or $1 million. We thought the smaller banner sign would be suitable. It would not have a rendering of the project. It would
Put a
just
picture
be.
for chiller. People would like to know what
We
they
could
look
do
like, you
that,
know?
but we would just simply
Sure we
list the
will.
project name.
I was, just the only reason I asked, I was in a meeting today and we were talking about 25 years ago when Seminole County got together and before their schools were really probably as good as they are. And they had a group that all they did was walk around and talked about how great Seminole County schools were, and all of a sudden people started believing it.
Right,
It's messaging.
that's right.
This is their money, it's money we got from taxpayers. I would say it loud and clear, and I don't care if it's 10,000 or if it's 10 million, just my opinion.
Excellent point.
$10 million.
I agree 100% with Mr. Thacker.
It's brand marketing, and it allows us an
It's
opportunity
a
to tell the
perception of what
community.
we are as a district,
Right.
that we're doing things, our schools look good, we're spending money on them.
Well said. Well said.
And I'll
We're
include
investing.
these signs with my follow-up email. So if you have any additional input, you'll have the opportunity to provide additional input. And that's all I have.
Well, just real quick, I tend to agree with Jay on the whole, I understand your point about the distinction between the two, but regardless of what pot we're talking about, it's all coming out of someone's pocket. Like, I'm kind of with Jay, like, let's create a brand that speaks to what we're doing across the district consistently. I don't think the
We're
green
all,
and the
it's all
orange.
investments in our students and our
I like
properties.
your blue and gold sign. I know I couldn't say that 20 years ago. I would have got kicked out. I would have never got voted in back in St. Cloud again. But I think I'm sitting here kind of thinking about it and listening to Mr. Weishauer, Mr. Wheeler. I'm with them. Why? In a marketing strategy, usually you want to brand something. Everybody knows that's an Osceola County School District sign. Still keep your thank you to voters, but just put impact fee instead of tax.
Okay,
Well,
I understand.
Find a
I'm
theme,
with that.
find a common theme, I guess, that's what you guys are saying.
So there would be recognition for
Yes.
that. If it's
Somebody
Somebody
knows that
drives
sign.
by, they see this, after a few months, they see the blue and gold, blue and yellow, and they go, oh, they're spending money. Spending time.
Yeah, the truth of it is, once they understand what these mean, they won't read them anymore. They'll just go, oh,
right.
because they'll understand the
Apparently
color,
they're
the
the
scheme,
Osceola
the
High School
perspective.
colors, but whatever.
It's about time we get something. Can't get a locker room.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mark.
Hats off to Michael. All right, I think we're done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
You got my email about sending us.